Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Catherine Matticer with Civility Partners, and I have the great Stacey Gordon here with me, the infamous Stacey Gordon. Now, Stacey is the CEO of Rework, and she, in her role as an executive advisor and diversity strategist, she coaches and counsels executive leaders on DEI strategies. She is the creator of the second highest viewed course on LinkedIn Learning, which is holy moly, mind-blowing, because there are a lot of courses on LinkedIn Learning. So to be number 2 is saying something very cool. And I'm fortunate enough to appear in the diversity, equity, and inclusion list of courses that LinkedIn put together. So my course is the Upstander course. And Stacey is also the author of Unbiased, Addressing Unconscious Bias at Work. And that's a book that reached #1 on several Amazon new release lists. So Stacey, thank you for making time for me. I feel like I should curtsy.
No. No, thank you. I mean, your course being part of the diversity, inclusion, and belonging, learning pathway, it's they're trending right now.
Yes, they are. They are. I've been talking about being an upstander for a long time in the world of workplace bullying. And then, of course, everyone all of a sudden was very interested in that topic related to other scenarios. So Stacey, tell us about why leaders need to understand the importance of DEI and the why of DEI.
I think, if I use the current example of the CEO of Blizzard Entertainment, right? Activision Blizzard. And there's, sexual harassment lawsuit going on right now. There, unfortunately, there was a woman who actually committed suicide because of all of the bullying, right? Mm-hmm. And sexual harassment, it falls into this category. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, people want to start thinking woo-woo, right? And we just want to talk about skipping hands, holding hands and skipping through the sunflowers or whatever. And it's like, no, this is so important for leaders to get. They have got to understand that, and in this case, for Blizzard, somebody's life was literally at stake, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not usually that serious, but for the people who are experiencing microaggressions in the workplace, for people who are experiencing bullying, for people who are experiencing the loneliness of going to work every day and not having anyone to talk to or to feel that they can trust, like the mental health aspects of that alone are just astounding. And we don't think about all of those, right? The ramifications of that. So leaders have got to start getting this. And I think that this is why these courses are trending, is because over and above, how to create Excel, right? How to write JavaScript, how to code, how to take wonderful photography, right? Like these courses are trending above and beyond all of that for this reason, that I think we're starting to understand the vital significance and the importance of this.
It kind of amazes me after all these years of doing this. I've been in business 11 years talking about bullying and the importance of psychological safety. And I've actually had twice where I was asked to submit a proposal for some training and some work around bullying or anti-bullying. And that was because of people committing suicide in these 2 different cases. And actually both times the CEO said I was too expensive. And it's just this kind of thing where it still boggles my mind that we have to take a stand against not caring for people at work. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but seems so innate that we would care about people at work. Why do we have to go through all of this? Still a question I ask myself. It's kind of
you would think that. And it's the same thing. I mean, I've been doing this work for many years, and companies who, the funny thing is companies that wouldn't hire me as a recruiter are now hiring me as a consultant, right? To come in and deal with these issues. And like you said, to say that, it's too expensive to deal with. It's like, really, what is the value on a human life? I'd like to know. Could you give me a dollar amount? Like, what is that?
Yeah, exactly. Both times that happened, it really rocked my world. I had a hard time functioning for the rest of the day when I got that news, both times. So tell us about you kind of came up with this word unbiased for your book, and talk to me about that word unbiased.
Yeah, it was a little controversial for me. I don't know about for anybody else, but I really thought long and hard about the title. And I thought, wow, if I put out the word unbiased, are people going to think that I'm suggesting that you can completely unbias yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, if people actually read the book, which is what I want them to do, they would realize that that's not what I'm saying at all. And that we all have bias. It stays with us. It's innate. It's embedded in our brains. But what we have to do is interrupt it. And we can do that. We can identify it. We can see it. We can point to it. And then we can stop ourselves. So when we're about to make a decision, there is a point where we can say, literally, self, you're about to make a decision. Before you make this decision, do you have all of the facts? Have you really done what was necessary to make sure that this was equitable? Did you open it up to everybody, right? Have you looked at all of the context? And just making sure that before you if you do those things and you start to have those conversations with yourself, mm-hmm. you will make less biased decisions over time, because mm-hmm. you're not working off of gut feel, you're not working off of this snap judgment, and you're really making sure that you are doing things in a way that is taking all of the data and information into account.
Yeah. So that, I think we have to continue to, I'm sure you're already doing this and many, to move away from DEI being related to something like racism. That, the point of DEI work is certainly to end racism if there is some in an organization, but ultimately to say to a leader, we should do some DEI work, isn't to say that the organization is racist or sexist. It's to say we all have some human instincts that we need to work through, and we need to start having conversations about those. I've just found, when I've recommended to some of my clients, hey, we need to get you an expert in here to do some of this work, that's sometimes the answer. Well, why? I'm not racist, and I just why are we tying that together?
Right. And that's always the thing I say, listen, get into a growth mindset. So stop being defensive. And instead of thinking about, when somebody says, we need to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, if your standard response to that is why I'm not racist, you probably need to have a conversation with somebody, right?
You definitely need DEI.
Right? There is a place where if defensiveness is your first response, you definitely have a problem. And that's just fact. I like to tell people that I want to be the angel or the devil, I don't know which one, on your shoulder, right? Just reminding you that you have a position that requires you to do something different. Mm-hmm. And especially for leaders, for individual contributors as well, right? We can all do something different, but there is a higher responsibility on the leaders of the organization. And if you don't like that extra responsibility, then you shouldn't have the job, right? Because you get paid the big bucks to do this. Yeah,
right. And I like leaders have to be in a growth mindset. You have to be willing to say, okay, I'm interested in exploring that because I'm the leader and I need to understand all of the options for this organization. And so how can you give us a tip around bias? So, some tangible takeaway. What's something that I can do personally today or tomorrow to make sure that I'm not leaning into my bias and I am stopping and recognizing where it shows up? Can you give us a couple tips?
Yeah, and I think it's a slippery slope, right? There's a couple of things that you have to do. It's not like one thing you can do today and all of a sudden you're not going to be biased.
Sure.
So first we have to start with, am I even aware that, or do I even understand what bias is and where it might show up? Mm-hmm. And so there is some introspection that needs to happen, because, I have people tell me, well, I don't believe in unconscious bias. I'm like, really? Because it's not too scary. So I'm not asking you to believe in it. I need you to understand it. And there's a difference. So if you don't even understand, it's like right now we're talking about critical race theory, and there's all these people who are up in arms about it. And I'm like, stop the conversation for a minute and tell me, do you understand what critical race theory is?
Right.
Right? Because we're having all these conversations back and forth. But I'm telling you, we've got two ignorant people having a conversation, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's the first step, is there needs to be some awareness that there are concepts and there are things that you may not understand. And then there needs to be some education around what those things are, because then you can identify them. But you can't identify something that you don't understand or can't see, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the tangible thing is starting to have these conversations. It sounds so, what's the word I want to say? It sounds so trite, right? Like, oh, just have a conversation. I'm not saying just have a conversation, but I am saying you have to immerse yourself in this. You have to start educating yourself. And that does include having conversations with people who are different than you, having conversations with people of different cultures, different faiths, different political beliefs, to start to open up your mind to being able to even receive the information, because then you can start to identify where you might be falling short, and then you can do something different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. So the one thing we can all do today, everyone listening, is to start talking to ourselves at the very least about our bias, and then having conversations with others. So here's a question, and maybe I'm a little off topic. You also hear, so obviously I'm white. And so if I want to learn about something like white privilege or the experience of a person of color or a Black female, certainly I can read a lot of books and spend a lot of time educating myself, but also asking questions from people like you to help me understand your experiences. But then on the flip side, you hear people say, well, it's not my responsibility to educate you. You should educate yourself. So, which I agree with, but also part of educating myself is having these conversations you're suggesting. I guess my question is, if somebody doesn't have a Stacey Gordon in their life to talk to, because you're obviously willing to talk about it and do that for a living, how do you navigate that? How do you ask a question of somebody without offending them or having them kind of go, well, educate yourself, and walking away,
Right. So you need to build a relationship. It reminds me of, for those women who have been pregnant, when you are pregnant, you will always have somebody reach out and touch your stomach. It's like you suddenly become community property.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the conversation around Blackness. Just because I'm Black doesn't mean I have to have a conversation with you about it. And it's the same with, just because I'm pregnant doesn't give you the right to walk up and start touching me, right? I don't know you, back up. And so it's that same analogy to me. I think that you definitely need to educate yourself, but then you need to have a relationship, because if you're my friend and I know you, we've at least had a few conversations, and I'm pregnant, you might walk up to me and say, Stacey, is it okay if I touch your belly? And I'll say yes, right? So it's the same thing. You might come to me and say, Stacey, I have a question about this. Can we have a conversation about it? And I'll say yes. But if I don't know you, we're not friends. We are just, we're telling people, like, what? Just start talking to strangers just because they're Black about their Blackness? Absolutely not. Do not do that.
Right.
Right? So this is the problem and to be 100% real, this is the problem a lot of white people have. They don't have Black people in their networks that they're friends with, so they don't have somebody to talk to. So that's the problem. You need to remedy that, right?
Yes.
Why don't you have people in your network that you can have this conversation with?
So that's a sign that you need to have that conversation, and so you need to make friends. Right. And then that's where the one Black person in a company ends up. Everyone's like, "Tell us what we should do." Right.
And then we get I have a Black friend. Like, really? Oh, you have one? That's wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. So you've got to build relationships with people. And that is a missing piece that does not happen. So That would be my step 2, right? Start building relationships. Start, again, when I say talk to people who are different than you, then yes, build that, have conversations, go to lunch with people who are different. You've got to start to create. We think that because we work with people and that we're coworkers, that that's a relationship status. It's not. It's a label, right? We just happen to show up to the same building and work. We are not friends.
Right. Right. I like that metaphor too, that the community, just because you're pregnant, it doesn't make you community property. And just because you're a person of color, it's not to make you community property. That's going to stick with me. I like that. Ooh, let me turn my phone off. Thank you for answering that. That's very helpful. So what about in the workplace? What are some things that organizations can be doing to tackle, creating inclusivity in their workplace?
We definitely, and I keep going back to the conversations, right? And I'll say that this is a workplace issue, because the other pushback we get is, well, why are we talking about this in the workplace? Everyone just wants to come to work and do their job. Yes, everyone would like to come to work and do their job. The problem is there are some people who, one, can't even come to work because you won't hire them.
Right.
And then there were some who will come to work and don't have the opportunity to be heard or to be, promoted because of who they are. So this is why it is a workplace issue.
Right.
And so as we start to think about that, I think that we have to be thinking through, like, where are some of those places that this starts? And so I think the big place is always in recruiting. Everybody thinks, oh, well, if we just hire more and if we just get a bigger talent pool, that will fix the issue. Mm-hmm. And again, it doesn't, because if you are bringing people into your talent pool, but then you're not hiring them, right? That happens. We come up with every excuse under the sun. They're not polished. They're not ready. They don't have enough experience. They didn't go to the right school. They don't live in the right neighborhood. I don't like their accent. Their English isn't good, right? I mean, like, we go through the list of things to then push them out of the pipeline. Mm-hmm. So these are all areas that we have to start looking at. And then even once you hire people, again, are you hiring people just because they're Black, just because they're a woman? I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they said that they had we're talking to a CEO, I think it was on a podcast actually, and she was saying that she was at a dinner, and a gentleman said to her, a CEO actually, that they hired this Black woman because they needed a Black person on the board. Now, this Black woman was just sitting 2 seats over from him and probably heard him say that. And then the fact is, he said it out loud to somebody. Right?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, not so good. Wow. In California, we're required to have, this year in California, you're required to have one woman on your board of directors or something. Right. And
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Gosh.
So there's this idea that, well, okay, we were required to have a woman on the board. Let's just go hire a woman.
Yeah.
It's not about just hiring a woman. It's about hiring a woman who has the experience, right? And honestly, that's great that we want to put women on boards. But how many boards are there? Right. A few thousand? Like, what is that really going to do for women in general? Nothing. If we want to actually fix these issues, we need to look at the entry-level positions. We need to look at the barriers that exist that are stopping people from getting promoted, right? Mm-hmm. And that they can't work their way up to that board seat. The reason you can't find women to put on board seats is because there's nobody who's been able to work their way through the system because of all the barriers that are in place.
Right.
And focusing on board seats is not going to solve the problem. It's going to make it great for a couple of white women who got some board seats. That's wonderful. But what about the rest of the women?
Right. And then you have COVID, where it really forced women out of the workplace too, because they were the ones who were like, oh gosh, somebody's got to take care of the kids. I guess that's me. And so then there's that too. So I feel like COVID really set back the DEI work or as far as we'd gone. Now we're pushed, 3 steps or 10 steps back, 20 steps. I don't know. We got to rework it.
Yes. No pun intended.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Good for me. Look at that. Awesome. So what's the first step? If I own, I have a company of 4 people, but let's say I own a 100-person company, or even 50, or maybe even with my 4. What's the first thing I should do? Is that conduct an assessment related to DEI? Is it have everyone do a training? Like what's the very first thing an organization needs to do?
I do believe an assessment will help. We recommend them. But again, we get pushback from that. Well, if we do an assessment, then we have it in writing that there's a problem, right? It's like, yes, but you also have it in writing that you're fixing it, which is better than not dealing with it at all, right? Because you're going to end up with a lot of other issues down the road. So doing the assessment, I would say, don't be afraid of an assessment. It is not something that you need to shy away from. It is something that is going to help you. And it's not also about us coming in and telling you all the things you're doing wrong, right? Mm-hmm. It's about identifying the places where things are working so you can duplicate that. It's like, look, this is working over here. Let's do more of that. Over mm-hmm. here, that's not working. Maybe we just need to make sure that there's something happening that's preventing what's working over here from transitioning over there. What's the barrier, right? Let's find out what that is. And then let's make sure that we push all this goodness everywhere, right? Like, why have it in just one department? Like, every company has that, where there's one department that's great and everybody wants to work in it. And then there's one department that everyone avoids like the plague, and turnover is a mess. Let's find out why.
Yeah, I like that. You're going to find out what's wrong, and it's going to be in writing, but also in writing that you're fixing it. And then you're showing your employees that you're listening, and that's going to, make a huge difference. And understanding your culture. So here's one other thing I think about too, is I feel like a lot of times DEI is an HR initiative, and it's over here. And then employee engagement initiatives over here. And then, performance management's over here. And so there's all these silos. How do you make sure that DEI is embedded into the DNA of the organization? I would assume it's just every nook and cranny of the organization's got to understand that, or you got to weave DEI in there, weave inclusivity in there. But tell me your thoughts.
It definitely has to be embedded in there. And the way that gets there is from the leadership. That is something that comes from top down. It is why I've actually created a new course called The Why of DEI. And it is specifically so that leaders can see this and they can start to understand. Because as soon as the top leaders, CEO and their executive teams, start to see why this is important, and they start to create and internalize a story for themselves on this, everybody else suddenly gets in line. All of a sudden, it's a high priority. All of a sudden, vision clears and there is clarity,
right,
about how to do these things, right? So it requires that the CEO and I'll say his team, because every CEO I've worked with so far has been male. Would love to change that, but this is where we are. But once they see it, and employees can see that there is authenticity, that they are living it, that they understand it, then all of a sudden it becomes a priority for the department heads. It becomes a priority for the talent acquisition leads. It becomes a priority for all the HR business partners. It becomes a priority, right, for all of the managers.
Mm-hmm. So we have to convince leaders that this is important and get their true buy-in in order for it to be successful ultimately.
Right. And I'm done convincing. So I'm at the point where this is why I created that course. I'm like, it's not my job to convince you. It's your job to convince you. You have to see it. Because if you don't see it, I can give you all the statistics and all the flowery things and make it all look pretty. And I can show you charts and graphs and PowerPoints and, all of that. But if you don't see it, complete waste of time, waste of your time and your money, or my time and your money.
I like that. That's a good position to take. I'm not going to convince you anymore. And I feel the same way. We go into toxic environments where there's aggression and bullying and conflict, and same kind of a thing. If you're not interested in making sure people feel good at work, then I can't help you. And your poor employees, all I can do is hope they find somewhere else where they feel valued.
Right. But what we can do is help others to see it. And then if those individuals don't get it, there's somebody who said, what DEI helps you to do is change the people. And if the people won't change, then we change the people.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that because, it's a little bit of a threat, right? It's a little bit of a stick that if you're not going to come in and get with the program, then you're going to have to go.
Yeah. And I see that and have said that too in my culture work, that like we're changing the culture. And if some people don't want to come along, that's fine. They'll either opt out or you'll change them out. So I'm with you. You got to hold tight to your culture and make sure it's a place where people feel good and included and valued, and that they can be themselves. So my work is adjacent to your work, but definitely in a little bit different realm. So thanks again, Stacey, for being here with me. And I'm going to post this LinkedIn Learning course, what do they call it? Track. It's got about 6 courses in it where Stacey and I both have a course. I will post a link to your book and your website. And thank you so much, Stacey, for again making time for little old me and my audience. You're the infamous Stacey Gordon. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.